NFL. Lead your team all the way to the Super Bowl. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Football is back already. Well, not really. We're in the off season in real life, but let's check in on those Bills. Sean, how are those Bills?
Those Bills actually exist for real this time, and are not just a red and blue BUF logo.
Right. So this is another NES football game, but this time with the NFL license. I mean, think about it. They are bragging on the back of the box about being able to say Super Bowl. Nobody else is allowed to say Super Bowl. The NFL owns that. They're letting you know that right away with the back of the box. However, you know, there's like no NFLPA. So it's just NFL. There's no like players necessarily or any stats there. So it's not quite the complete package yet, but I could imagine a lot of people the game is going to sell well because it has NFL on it.
Yeah, this is I mean the whole thing about the NFLPA might give you a better experience because, you know, that's your team. Those are your guys. Whereas in this, like, the NFL just sort of shows you, like, okay, this is the product that the NFL thinks is good enough to sell me as the football simulation, so it's got to be good, right?
Yeah, I hear this is what the players in the NFL actually use to train.
Yeah. Actually, what's his name? Tom Bass. Is shouted out in the manual as, I don't know, he was probably an assistant coach in places. It said he has 20 years of NFL coaching experience, and he was a supervisor, not a supervisor, a consultant. So that's their like appeal to authority to sell this game as the real football game.
Yeah, I mean, they put it in bold on the box that this is the only licensed NFL NES game. So they wanted you to know when you go to the toy store and it's put right next to the other football games that this is the legal one. You're doing something wrong if you buy, strangely enough though, only 10-Yard Fight and Tecmo Bowl, right? We haven't had any other football games to the best of,
that's it.
No, that's not true. That quarterback game. What was that guy? Remember?
John Elway.
Yeah, John Elway's quarterback.
Shit,
so
right.
Sorry, this is the fourth football game, but John Elway also not the NFL. He was just a lone man acting alone.
That is just John Elway.
He went rogue.
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of has the same like layout as Tecmo Bowl. Like, I mean, it kind of sucks because like this game comes out not too far removed from like a classic football game, like probably the best you're gonna get from a football game in this era, and it looks kind of similar.
Yeah, and I mean the appeal of an NFL game is having the NFL teams, but in this one they didn't make the teams unique. You just choose the team that you want to play as. So if you are a Bills fan, you would choose Buffalo. But then you're not greeted with like the stats. Forget the players. You're not even greeted with the stats of the Bills for that season. You are greeted with 6 potentially balanced types of teams that you choose from. And on the one hand, this is great if your team sucked that year, because now they don't suck in this version of the game. Like, you don't really think about that, but there were many years as a Mets fan that I would buy baseball games and they were terrible. And it's like, this isn't a fun experience unless you trade everybody that's on that team for, you trade like 3 guys for 1 superstar or something. But Sean, since you are the de facto, football fan here, I'm curious, did you think, just as like a time capsule, does this help or hurt the game? That you're just basically, the Bills and the Jets can theoretically be the same exact team, and they go up against each other, and the only difference now is one's on offense and one's on defense, depending on who has the ball.
And this is like the last I'll say on the whole licensing thing. The only thing about this game that is affected by this is the fact that you are greeted by the NFL shield in the beginning of the game. You see the NFL shield in the middle of the field every time you play. Each of the end zones say NFL, and you have the real team names in the select screen and on the scoreboard. Doesn't say anything about the city name. It doesn't have the team logos. It doesn't have even the city name or the team logo on the field of which you play. It has a very loose version of team colors for the players on the field. Really, the only thing that this NFL license did was put the team names in the game. That's it. And you're right, each team is just it's the same team that you can tweak if you want. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say my initial thought was that, okay, that was probably, we kind of touched on it. That was probably enough for them to just put the names in there. People are going to say, oh my God, the NFL, I want it. They're we don't even need to go the extra mile and put team stats or anything like that. But then I realized that they did put team stats. They just, instead of having them apply to a particular team, they just let you select any of those stat layouts, which, I guess still brings back to the question for you, Sean, if you thought it was better having it that way. But, I thought, well, if they went through the trouble of putting, I know it was only 6, but putting these 6 different types of team stats in the game, why didn't they just assign those to different teams to give the teams some sort of reason for being separate teams?
Even in the college football games, and there's no NCAA Players Association to sign off on likenesses and name rights. Even then, QB1 for USC would still be back in the day, that's still close enough to Matt Leinart or something. It would be this is what we think his stats would be, but we can't give him a name. But you can name him Matt Leinart if you want in the settings. And I would have expected QB12 on the Buffalo Bills to kind of have the same stats as Jim Kelly, but there is no number. There's just a character that is sort of lined up where a quarterback would be, and he would throw the ball.
They do include a handicap mode, which at first I avoided because I didn't really understand. I thought that was to give a crutch if you're playing with one player and another, to be all right, I'll downgrade myself, or, you start the game with extra points or something. It's not that. Instead, it's a way to customize the 6 team types so that you can change a C all the way up to an A, or 2 C's to a B. It's pretty customizable in that regard. I thought that was another neat feature, but again, it seems like something where at that point, rather than just give the handicap to specific point allotments or whatever, they should have just let you get I'm thinking of Fallout or other games where you just basically start with all Fs and then you're given a certain amount of points where you build out your team.
Point allocation, yeah.
Exactly. I think that would have been better than this handicap system, which is still nice to have, don't get me wrong.
And if this is it Bases Loaded that has sort of, you can create a team? Which baseball game was that we played recently? And you could play a whole season. Was that Bases Loaded?
I thought it was Baseball Stars.
Baseball Stars, yes. Yeah. Okay. If I would have expected something like this to be in an NFL analog to Baseball Stars, where you're creating a football team and you're saying that, okay, this game, this quarterback's kind of shitty, but the offensive line and the running back are good. So we're going to be a run first team. I would have expected this to be in a game like that, not in a game that has the NFL license. So it should reflect the NFL in some way. That's the last that I'll harp on the kind of meaninglessness of this license.
Well, I have one more thing to harp on with the teams, and it's actually a funny thing that you mentioned earlier that I never thought about until you brought it up, but you were saying that it's weird that they don't have, or not that it's weird, but just that they don't mention the location. So you are the Bills. You're not the Buffalo Bills. You sure are, but it doesn't say it anywhere. It doesn't even list the city or anything. That actually works in the favor of the Rams and the Raiders. Now those teams take place in different cities and it doesn't feel dated. I don't know, though. If you guys are like me, sports games on any console were always like cheaper if they were older, and it was fun to like go back and play that year's stats of things with that year's players or whatever. And just like, for me, that was another way, because keep in mind, we didn't have YouTube and all that. It was another way to like learn about what happened or who was good those years in those particular sports. And so that element is lost here.
Absolutely. What did you guys think of the football itself?
Oh, I forgot about the football.
So you bring up a good point, Sean, because I feel like let's not break down football again for everyone. I'm sure by now, any sport, it seems silly to do that. So what I wanted to talk about is the flow of the game, because that is the thing that changes from developer to developer. Is, yeah, they're going to follow the rules of the sport as closely as they choose to, and they're going to, try to make it look like a game of football, but the flow of NFL is arguably much different than Tecmo Bowl. And I think the biggest thing to notice is that they're, as a low-informed watcher, just somebody who watches football casually, doesn't really understand the strategy of anything, it's mostly a game that is very segmented between plays and playbook. That time where like they're coming up with the plays and the clock's counting down, but there's no actual action going on, and then the actual play of the down, which is something that happens very quickly. In this game, both sections of that are almost like exaggeratedly long for a video game.
Oh, yeah.
Both figuring out which play you want to do, something you have to refer to in a separate sheet, and then also the experience of being within that down. I don't know what we call those things, Sean. Is it a play?
Each down, I guess, would be a play, yeah.
So, yeah, each play, like how long that takes to play out. I don't know. The flow felt very interrupted here. Go for it.
I'd say that when you play Tecmo Bowl, and I'm always going to compare it to that, it's very streamlined. You get like a play select, and you pick your play, and then you're immediately brought to the field to execute your play. And then in this game, you're looking at your scoreboard, and then you sort of do this blind play select, even if you're playing against the computer, that you have to, like Mike said, refer to your manual to know what play you're going to pick. And then it's going to show you like the defensive lineup. Like, you're going to see how many defensive backs they got, and they're going to show like your receivers and all that shit. And then you're going to see your guys, and then you're going to hike the ball and run or pass. There's even more steps, like where, like, exactly, like football is a very start and stop sport, where everything happens all at once and then nothing happens. This just sort of adds even more not happening to the game. And I don't really get it. Like, a lot of this can be one screen, but they choose to split it up between 5.
Yeah, I think that, my experience maybe wasn't quite as bad, because I will confess that I almost never referred to the like plays for like what the inputs are for the plays. After like a couple minutes of playing this game, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to pick random plays and hope that they work, because I do not feel like looking up these things every 2 seconds, because that just takes forever. I'm granted, like, I don't know what a good alternative is if you really want to get into like having all these different plays and stuff. Like, I can see this being a positive, but for me, I was just like, I just kind of want to see how the game plays. So yeah, I ended up kind of abandoning that pretty quickly.
The one thing that I did like, and like any play can pretty much be a run or a pass play, which is fine. But what I did like is when you do end up passing, and there's several steps to actually throwing the ball, which I don't really want to get into, but there's more steps than there should be. It'll zoom in to your receiver to sort of give you a bit more get more to work with in terms of, are you going to receive this ball? Is this ball going to get deflected? Is this ball going to be intercepted? I liked that. It's a bit more like cinematic than like Tecmo. But again, it's all in the execution, and it sort of falls flat. It's adding more stops to the play now within the play, which this game does not need. And then if you just zoom out to the game at large, like, I have never seen since 10-Yard Fight, I have not seen football players move this slowly. And it doesn't even, like, it's not even just that the players aren't moving slowly. The screen is scrolling slowly, and it looks like they're all doing this weird, like, strut instead of running. They're, like, strutting down the field, and then the camera just jerks down the field in time with this strut. It's comical. I don't know how else to describe it other than movement in this game feeling comically like a dance.
And it feels bad from the moment you have the ball, or, you know, like when you're in that 40-yard screen. But there is a moment during passing plays where it slows down even further as an intentional slow-mo, so that you can focus on, like,
make your decision.
who's open and what you want to do and stuff like that. I just found it was all happening, like, those plays were happening way too long and everything, but also the breakup between the 3 stages of the scoreboard, the playbook, the 40-yard screen, the 15-yard zoom in to the 40-yard screen. Like, I can't even imagine how long an actual game of NFL would have taken me to play out, especially because I was trying to play this authentically with the offensive playbook, which is, as far as I know, separate from the manual. It's its own separate instruction sheet, which kind of makes it like a neat relic. Obviously, it was translated to GameFAQs, but I just feel like it's strange. On one level, it's a unique way to create a lot of different plays, right? It takes away the ability to screen look at all. You lock it. It has an NES controller, and you lock in your picks, and the offense doesn't know what the defense is doing, and so on and so forth. You have the ability to call out audibles in the before the ball is hiked too, which is like a really interesting extra mechanic, but it feels overly complicated for the product. I get that they were going for something more true to the NFL experience, being able to even have penalties like face mask and stuff like that. Like, these are all cool, neat touches. It just actually makes for a slower, boring experience when it actually, like, happens in practice.
And especially because when you read the manual, it outright tells you that this gets modulated by if you use, like, handicaps or upgrade your stats at all. But the game outright says, and then 2 penalties per team will randomly be will be assorted. And I'm like, wait a second, don't tell me that. Like, that has always been a complaint of football games, is that penalties like face mask and penalties like unsportsmanlike have always been random, and now you're just telling me that, like, even without the added simulation of the more recent games, now it's just gonna happen whenever. I don't know.
That's funny.
The manual even goes as far as to give you, in the strategy section, just a talking to about, like, how you're not going to have fun at first. Like, you don't think about having fun. You have to learn how to play this game. The beginning player might be overwhelmed by all of the options and the complexity of the controls in this game. Don't be discouraged. In order to play like the pros, you have to put in some practice time. That's only paragraph 1 of them. What is a second paragraph of a very long, detailed explanation about why you shouldn't even attempt passing until you figured out the running game and stuff like. It's just like, it's nonsense. It's like telling people in Super Mario Brothers, like, you're not ready for the fire flower. Like, just learn how to jump over the pitfalls first, buddy.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe they realized, like, oh, like, this game is complicated for our young audience. Maybe we need to, like, get ahead of that right away before they just put the game down.
And I could understand that if it was actually a challenging game, but the all the complexities they've put in, the computer can be very easily cheesed. I'm not saying the computer's bad by any means or it's not a difficult game, but I found that just picking the running play, within 4 downs, I was probably going to gain enough yards to get the first down and just continue to repeat that kind of action. In some ways, the computer is just a practice mode in this game for the actual human versus human element that would probably be a lot more exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just like, but we already complained about how, like, as a baseline presentation, there isn't much in terms of the differences between teams and how they use the license. But like, even you don't even need to have anybody's face licensed. Like, have there be a little cutscene of a touchdown, like in Tecmo Bowl. Like, make it fun in some way. Just because it's a simulation doesn't mean it doesn't have to be fun, no matter if Tom Bass wrote a strongly worded letter in the manual saying that you shouldn't have fun. Like, you can still do stuff like that.
Yeah, especially because they already have in this game, like, that close up for when you're receiving a pass. They could just do something similar.
Spike
like that.
the ball.
Like they were, yeah, they already had, like, animations like that. Can I back up a bit? I want to get your guys' like deeper thoughts on that animation when you're receiving the ball, because I had an interesting kind of process with that. Because at first I was like, that's really annoying, and I did feel like that like interrupts the gameplay in a weird way. That like why am I going to a different view now? No other football game has done it this way. But as I played it, I actually grew to really appreciate that part. It actually made it feel like receiving a pass was a little more, I had a little more agency in it. It was a little more like, rather than it just being like, oh yeah, I was generally in the right area, so I caught the pass. Where it's like, oh no, it now zooms in and there'll be like, the receiver is there, and also like whoever is defending you is there. And if you're playing 2-player, it feels a little more satisfying to get an interception because you feel like you did it. You have to jump and you have to grab the ball, and it felt, as much as it is a little bit of like a weird interruption, that made it more fun. And full disclosure, I only played this game 2-player, and in that way it was fun. But I wonder if it was how the computer handled that.
I mean, the computer, it can catch, and I had actually been intercepted. I've been intercepted in this game too, so it's not like it's a gimme every time. And I do like that you sort of will control your receiver after the fact. I just think that the cons sort of outweigh the pros in terms of the because these games are so long. Like, you're actually going to play this game for an hour if you want to play the full game, because you can't play an abridged game. It's like, I think they're all 15-minute quarters.
Right.
And it's a slow clock. So when you add in all of these little things, it just becomes a slog. And I do agree that at its basis level, it's a cool idea. I just think that its execution ends up harming the pace more than it helps, like, the engagement.
And even that 15-yard screen the zoom-in screen, it doesn't that feel like a little empty? Isn't it weird that there's only ever like 3 characters maximum in that particular part of the field? I don't know football that well, but like when I see them on TV, it looks like they're, it's either a really deep pass where it's just 2 guys, or even just looking at the 40-yard screen here, it seems like there's a lot of action happening, and then they just microscopic down to just 2 players. It's like, how zoomed in are we that we can't see the other guys on the field?
I'll say that just by virtue of the players in this game walking through molasses, you'll very rarely be able to get to a one-on-one situation where it's just like a corner and a wide receiver, and that's all that's going to be in that 15-yard zoom-in screen. Because most of the time, you're not going to be able to get off a pass, or you'll be surrounded by defenders as the quarterback, and your receivers will still just be like 10 yards down the field, surrounded by defenders as well. So, yeah, I do think that maybe they're cutting some defenders to make that, like, that secondary screen more manageable. I don't actually know. But you're right. It now that I think about it, it does feel a little off.
Yeah, you know what? I forgot when I mentioned the positives about that I did also want to follow that up with one negative about that close-up screen, and that is that it appears to me, and correct me if you guys felt that this was not true, but it appears to me that that close-up, microscope view is not actually laid out. The players are not actually in the same position that they are in the overall
That's
view.
sort of what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, so when it cuts back, I'm always like for a second a little confused. Where am I?
Mm-hmm.
And who am I? Who's defending me? Like it'll cut back and I will run right into like a tackle because I didn't know that guy was there because he wasn't.
He wasn't there when you were zoomed in, but now he's
right.
there. Yeah, it's like in I forgot Endless Legend. Like where when you meet on the hex grid, then you start another like mini battle within that hex, and then you come back out of it, and like it's all just different abstractions of football instead of football.
It's like a random encounter.
Yeah, exactly. Game. Yeah.
A thing I could appreciate though about the presentation of the game is how much information is conveyed to you in a simple, effective manner, both on the 40-yard screen where you have your time on the clock, your downs, and how much you have to go, but also in the scoreboard. There's a lot of information there in terms of, both the players selecting their inputs that they're going to make for their play selection, but also the nice like referee graphics that change depending on the situation. I feel like they didn't leave anything out that they could have. I know there's no challenging plays or anything like that, but for the most part, everything that you would expect to need to know as a coach of an NFL team in terms of the play selection and where you are in the game, it's all like laid out very nicely and almost like a TV experience.
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, like they did model the game out correctly. Like I did a couple tests, like a safety ends up being a safety. It will sort of default you to a punt, and then you'll actually get like a punt returner in the back when it is when you actually are punting. Like they do model out the game correctly, and you do have all the information that you need to play it within the constraints that they've given you. And yeah, I do like some of the little graphics that they show, but they could have done a lot more. Just to give it
that's
some personality.
That's the only thing I like presentation-wise, actually, because if you think about even just the field of the game, you were talking about how they have the NFL end zones. That would have been a perfect opportunity to get some team logos in there that are sorely missing in this game. But even in 15-minute quarters, the quarters that you must play through, there is no halftime show in the middle, something that would have been very easy to do and could have been fun with some nice sprite work. There could have been information before the game about just like made up stats or something that you get to see, some kind of opening ceremony or something. There's plenty that we've seen in other sports games that I'm just riffing on here. I'm not coming up with anything original. It just feels strange that the game is so straightforward that it wants you to just pretty much have like the coaching experience of a football game and not much else.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree as well, although I'll say I don't miss the halftime show type thing. Usually that's like funny to watch once, and then I'm kind of like, okay, let me just play this game.
That's fair.
You don't like the little ETs in soccer?
Oh, I forgot about that.
So this game was the first NFL game since NFL football, which was released all the way back in 1979, 10 years prior, for the Intellivision. And I took a look at that game, and let's just say, it is actually a nice improvement over, like the NES did, when you think about everything that came before it, like we're talking about NES games in 2022 and occasionally we'll complain about the graphics, but I think we have a high tolerance. When I look at Intellivision games, they're unplayable.
Yeah, they're just like lines, right? It's like a line with a suggestion of a head on top of it.
That's more Atari 2600, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, Intellivision gets that way too, for the most part. So I think it's just, in a way, this is a good experience for people who, at this day and age, like who just wanted the NFL like team of their choice, right? Theoretically, Sean, if you were buying NES games in 1989, you would have likely have bought this one just to be able to play as the Bills, right?
Sure. And
that would have
then
meant something
I
to you.
Definitely would have already owned Tecmo Bowl, and I would have just continued to play Tecmo Bowl.
Got it. Okay, fair enough.
Oh, shit.
Well,
this isn't the essential games list.
right. You're going to have to probably say that again because we are about to do the one thing we must do every episode, and that is decide whether NFL is an essential game on the essential games list.
Organization.
It just, it felt weird, right? It's like, the game is just called NFL, or is it called NFL football? On the box, it's just NFL. So if it is called NFL football, tell me where, because I don't see that anywhere. But also, that would be strange, because that would mean that it would be called National Football League football. Sean, your vote once more.
Yeah, I already said what I said. Love football. I mean, any chance I get to play it in some digital way, I will. But I mean, we've already come a long way with, I'll say it again, Tecmo Bowl. It is an essential game, and this NFL game is not. Back to you.
Back to you, Joe. What do you think?
I was going to just go, but he threw it back to you, so I had to wait for you to call on me. Like I said, I played this 2-player, and I always think that, usually think that is a recipe for having a little more fun than playing single player anyways. And in that sense, we didn't not have fun, but still, even then, it was like, God, this game is so long, and it is a little tedious. It took a while, and I'll say that part of the fun was just like figuring out how the game worked on the fly. And I think like once we both figured out how the game worked, like nobody scored again.
I was gonna ask.
I don't know what that means. like if the game's too easy or too hard, but like
I was gonna ask who won.
He won. My buddy Eric won. It was not friend of the show Mark, but it was new friend of the show Eric, old friend of mine. I don't know why I'm going on so much about this. This game's not essential, but it was like sort of fun to play 2-player. I'm not a football game guy, so take that for what you will.
I just noticed that the only place where you can find any of the team logos on this product is in the manual. It's the very first thing they want you to know. Who's in the AFC versus who's in the NFC, before they even tell you to treat your interactive game carefully or give you an introduction on the lowdown of what it means to play this game. They give you those logos and then you never see them again. A weird touch again, just like a lot of weird touches in this game. We didn't mention that this is an LJN game. Not that it really matters, but it does seem like once again, LJN has found a way to just convince another person to let them like license their products so that they could make some half-baked game. Because, we do have Tecmo Bowl, but I would argue, forget about what we have and just think about like if this was the only football game that we had access to on the NES. I think I wouldn't be satisfied at all. Like, I think I would still have these same complaints about the flow of the game and how long it takes. It's nice that 9 innings of baseball on any of these 7 baseball games we've played hasn't felt like it would take me an hour plus to get through them. And yet this game, I never completed a full game just because I could feel the slog. I was happy to play test other teams and see like if there was balance changes, but the actual like experience of playing a full game, I don't know, it never appealed to me. And so that's like a warning sign right there that if you can't even get through a full simulation of a sports game, let alone you're probably supposed to play 16 of these, right? Or 17, or how many football games they play these days in the season, Sean?
Now it's 17, but there's no season mode in this.
Right. There's no season mode in this either, so that's why it's not on the essential games list. All right. That's been another episode of Nostalgia. And we're going to do another one next week. POW, Prisoners of War. I don't think it's a football game. So that's good. But it's an SNK game, and we haven't heard from SNK in a long time.
Yeah.
I think the last time they were baseball stars, believe it or not.
Yeah. Wow.
So they are releasing their games around other sports games, or they are releasing sports games.
It was wild and sorry.
Mid yawn.
Yeah.
Leave
It's
that
okay.
in.
I'm sure
I want everything left in.
I'm sure half the listeners are mid right now.
I was gonna say those wild and crazy kids, but anyway.
Yeah. POW Prisoners of War is next, followed by Sesame Street ABC, the acclaimed sequel to Sesame Street
hell
1,
yeah.
2, 3. Little interesting, they chose to go with ABC instead of 4, 5, 6, the natural progression of numbers, but I'm sure we'll learn a lesson or two there. Keep in mind, we also have our Nostalgia Bites Dig Dug episode coming up for our Patreon members. And after that, you guessed it, more episodes of Nostalgia every single Friday. If you want even more than that, go to www.nostalgicast.com or tweet at us at NostalgiaCast on Twitter, or tweet me at EspositoFilm on Twitter, or reach out to Sean and Joe exclusively on our Discord if you're a Patreon member, patreon.com/nostalgia.